another episode with Jakob Appelbaum.
Jacob Appelbaum.
Jacob Appelbaum. Jacob, I heard about this guy called Edward Snowden lately. Why is that guy important?
Well, I think that he's important, but what he has revealed is even more important.
So should we talk about him or what he revealed?
I think we should talk about what he has revealed.
All right.
I think we should also mention that we should never forget that people who reveal great things at great personal expense should receive protection and help, especially from the people who are benefiting. And what Snowden has done is he has revealed information that is the public interest's information, in my opinion. It is in the public's interest, the best interest of the public, in fact, to have this information in the open. Mm-hmm. He has revealed serious crimes. He has revealed that when you reveal these serious crimes, that people and governments that are run by those people, especially the people who should have not committed those crimes, who should have known that they were crimes and should have stopped well before these things have occurred, largely in secret, that those people will stop at almost nothing to try to silence him or to try to arrest him and hound him. So, well, we should definitely talk about his leaks. And we should definitely talk about his whistleblowing in the public interest. We should not forget about the fact that he himself needs help. Because right now he's stuck in an airport, unable to really receive asylum from many countries. And this is a serious problem. Germany could help with this to ensure that he could safely get to the countries where asylum has been offered. So, well, we shouldn't talk so much about him. We should not forget about him. Just as we shouldn't forget about Bradley Manning or Julian Assange or any of the other people throughout history, like Daniel Ellsberg, who revealed serious wrongdoings, and serious wrongdoings which, when revealed to the public, were in the public's interest. But at the same time, the story's not about them. But we shouldn't martyr them. This is the key thing.
You mentioned Bradley Manning, Julian Assange, Edward Snowden. Why do people call them traitors?
Well, I think there's a lot of propaganda. We live in a time of immense propaganda. And the very few people that would dare to call them traitors would do so because they don't understand what has been revealed, and they think that it is harmful, when in fact there is no harm from any of these things. And so it's very easy to have a reactionary and fear-based assumption of damage, but it's simply not the case. It's just not true.
Well, who could be damaged by this leak?
Well, I think in the case of Snowden, what we learn is that there are a number of people who are supposed to be acting in the interests of the people, that are supposed to be acting lawfully. And what we find is that that's simply not the case. It is not lawful to have a secret court that redefines basic words in the English language.
Like what?
The word relevant, for example, as revealed by the Wall Street Journal. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court actually redefined the word relevant such that it does not mean anything that is a common understanding of the word relevant. So where relevant would suggest that you would be selective and you would think, is this piece of information relevant? Well, let's weigh it. Let's understand whether or not this is relevant. What they redefined it is to suggest that everything is always relevant all of the time.
Of course.
So the redefinition could basically be rephrased as, is it?
Or it could be relevant at some point.
Yeah. So, but that's not what relevant means. Relevant is not a synonym for does it exist, right? And this is the kind of thing that when it happens in secret, it's absolutely shocking. To imagine that bulk interception of all communication systems is possible is not beyond comprehension. Everyone can imagine this. This is the stuff that people fear of communist China or of the GDR or, really awful places. But what is shocking, even if it isn't surprising at the same time, is that it is also the case that these things are happening in secret. And Edward Snowden has revealed this. He has revealed that the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, or the FISA court, they have revealed nothing to the public, and Snowden has revealed that they have been getting companies like Verizon, for example, to do dragnet surveillance operations, to give all of the data about people calling, all of this information, which is very private data, every person's cell phone bill effectively, handed over to the NSA in real time. He has revealed information that shows that the NSA is doing this for the entire world, in fact, for Brazil, for example. In O Globo, it was recently published about a system called X-Keyscore, which is a targeting system. So that's a very scary thing. It means you take all this metadata, and then the NSA has essentially databases to simply dig through, to be able to find things to search for. And that's very scary stuff.
What are they searching for?
Well, I mean, it depends on which
terrorists and terrorist phrases, or what?
That's a very good question. We don't know the answer to that.
We don't know that?
Yeah, we can't know the answer to that because...
We can't.
How would you be allowed to know that? It's all secret. It's all a secret. So we can't have this debate because it's a one-sided debate. What little bit of information we know is that it is all secret and they can't even reveal the existence of these programs. And when Edward Snowden has revealed these things, he has revealed things that have given us, in some cases, more questions than answers. And this is very scary because the things that we now have questions about are not whether or not it's happening. That's undeniable. Mm-hmm. No, the question is, how is it legal, lawful, or proportional for the United States to spy on Germany? Germany is the most spied upon nation in Europe. Now, in theory, the Americans are benevolent, and I generally actually have a very high praise of the United States. I mean, I'm an American, and I'm proud of being from the United States. I'm from the Bare Republic of California, so I'm from a very independent part of the United States. And I'm not, anti-American by any means. But it's extremely scary to imagine that if you should happen to dissent against the current political administration, if you should think that torture is wrong, or force-feeding in Guantanamo Bay is wrong, or that wars are wrong, maybe it is you that they search for. Maybe when they search for you, they find all of your friends. And what is scary is not that America is an awful place now. What is scary is that when you build these systems, the systems that Snowden has revealed, people who are very awful are drawn to those systems. And that is the scary thing, which is that the next generation of people who don't have the same morality, who don't have the same ethics, who don't have the same concerns, they don't have the same historical perspective, when those people are drawn to these systems and they're jealous and they're envious and they are interested in your girlfriend or someone's boyfriend or someone's job or someone's academic career or someone's economic espionage secrets, let's say, those things become very, very, very open to people with these systems. Mm-hmm. And that is not proportional. And it is certainly not legal. So for all of the legal wiretapping that may take place here, or so-called lawful interception in Germany, because people are left vulnerable, the NSA can simply spy on everyone all of the time. Outside of parliamentary oversight, outside of, well, it's not as if the sitting German government right now is doing very much in terms of that, right? When your foreign minister was just in the United States, I guess most of the oppositional parties were not very pleased with what he said, which was effectively nothing. Yeah. But that's not the point. The point is that if he did say something, it would be irrelevant because it is not the German government that decides about the German people's data. It is the American government who decides because they have the data and they do whatever they want with it.
I thought we are a sovereign nation.
Well, you are a nation under surveillance, and your nation uses surveillance data. But the point is it's both. And the fact that it's both is actually what is so scary. If it was merely Germany doing it to itself, and it was always proportional, it was always under a court, that is, if the technical and the legal were exactly aligned, then it would be a different discussion. But it isn't. Okay. That's not what's happening. And so what Snowden has revealed to the world is this kind of stuff. So, for example, he revealed that the British actually have what's called a full take system. That is, they get every single thing sent over the internet. But that includes when you call, for example, a telephone number for your health services, if they happen to have a call center in the United Kingdom. Everything. So 3 full days. Whatever you do on the internet, if it ever goes into the United Kingdom, or if it's ever routed through the United Kingdom on its way to another country, which happens, even if you visit websites you think might be in Germany, it's recorded. Really? 100% for 3 full days. And then the things that are in there that are interesting, they get stored forever. And the metadata, that is the data about things, that also appears to be stored forever. So this is what I mean by it seems to bring more questions than it does answers. And they're horrific questions. Because the questions that come to mind are, and what happens when someone wishes to find every Muslim or every Jew? Right? As a person with the last name of Appelbaum, in Germany, I'm very sensitive to this notion that I want to choose when someone learns about my background and about my history. And I am robbed of that choice when these systems record everything about me, all of my associations, and someone else gets to ask the database and not me about my history, especially because there exists a concept, it's called the Data Doppelganger. And this is essentially the data shadow you leave behind. And the thing is that at some point it becomes more you than you. Someone looks at it and they say, oh, you're very radical politically, but you're not. You just happen to read very broadly across many different spectrums. You look at websites.
So you're a reader.
Oh, yeah. It's like the Bill Hicks quote.
Right.
What you reading?
Yeah. What you reading about?
Well, what are you reading for?
What you reading for?
Well, I've never been asked what I'm reading for. I suppose for enjoyment. I suppose. Yeah, exactly. But this
I'm glad you know Bill Hicks.
Yeah, well, of course, right? I want to travel through space, right? And every human should be clothed and educated and fed, and we could stop having wars, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Bill Hicks is great. I love him. I think it's too bad he died.
Yeah, died too early. Okay, so what's the problem here? Is the problem that we don't know about things, that it's all secret, or that the things are being done, or both?
Well, there are a lot of problems, but there are lots of good things too. So, for example, it's certainly problematic that these things are done in secret because, in theory, some of these things are legitimate from the position of consent. That is, when it is democratic and consensual, it can be legitimate. But when it is secret, then it is not consensual, because we cannot have a democracy without a well-informed people. Therefore, it is clear that when it is secret, it is not as consensual as it would it be done in the open. My representatives in the United States cannot represent me when many of them, for example, are not even told about the existence of these programs, or they're told about them, but it's scoped in such a way that they don't understand it. That's a really serious problem. But it is certainly not consensual for Germany, because I've never met a single German that voted on any American legislation without also being an American citizen. So for every German that isn't an American citizen, it is not consensual, and therefore it is not legitimate, and it is not proportional. So part of what Snowden has revealed to us is exactly that. Huge problem that there's a disconnect between what we believe is happening and what is possible, and what is actually taking place and why it is taking place and who it is doing it. These things are all very disconnected from just a couple of months ago. If we were to talk about total surveillance of the planet 3 months ago, and I did, in fact, 7 months ago in Berlin at the 29C3, I specifically said that General Alexander from the National Security Agency was a liar. And I said he was a liar because when he was questioned before Congress about whether or not the National Security Agency does exactly what we know Snowden has revealed, right, he said no. He lied to Congress, in front of Congress.
Well, maybe he had a good reason.
Yes, because he's a criminal.
See?
So he was covering up his own criminal misdeeds.
That's the reason.
Right, with that kind of secrecy. But secrecy and privacy are not the same. We should be clear, right? Privacy is a question of autonomy. But when people in the public body, when in a republic we have public servants, their job is to work for us. And the only way they can effectively work for us, the only way we can trust them to do things without knowing every little thing, is that the big things, the important details, they're not kept secret. And so they remain, as I said, consensual. And when they're consensual, they are legitimate. So that when they are secret and then they are not consensual, they're no longer legitimate. So Snowden has revealed to us that there is massive wiretapping. He has revealed to us that there is a bulk wiretapping that the planet has never seen. So much so that Stasi agents in Berlin have even joked about it, but some have seriously said, we wish that we had had this. Right? When Stasi people say they wish they had had this, maybe there'd still be a GDR, I think was a phrase someone had repeated to me. I don't know if that was in the media, but I thought that was really one of the most awful things I had ever heard. Yeah. You know, when the fascists of yesterday talk about how they wish that they could have had these systems so they could still remain the fascists of today, that's not something that makes me comfortable, right? It suggests we're not learning from history. It suggests we're repeating it with better technology. So
actually, like you were mentioning Stasi, what the Stasi was able to do was like if they wanted to surveil somebody, they would actually target him or target her or him, and then actually listen in on the call and all that, and
yeah, absolutely. And Merkel says, "Oh, you can't compare this to the Stasi."
And it's true, right?
Yeah, you absolutely can't compare this to the Stasi.
It's much worse.
It is both worse and better. And I'll tell you.
Worse and better.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example.
Okay.
People really had a fear of the Stasi, and all of my friends from the East that tell me about what it was like, they tell me about this real fear. And they tell me about Zersetzung, right? And that's a really... Zersetzung, the disintegration of the person that is part of the operational psychology of the Stasi. Well, the thing is that there exists in American history a thing called the counterintelligence programs, or COINTELPRO. And what the COINTELPRO programs are is the same. It's the American version of Zersetzung. Right? They infiltrated organizations, they destroy people's lives, they like have secret agents that sleep with people in order to like have children with them to be deep undercover. This kind of stuff, like, and then replacing things in their house and changing things, hanging up phones, like doing weird stuff that lets you know someone else has been there. So it's better than the Stasi in the sense that very few people are experiencing that right now. But I myself, my friends and my family, they've experienced those types of things because we have been targeted by these systems.
My family too. But back in the day of the Stasi.
Okay.
We're from East Germany.
Okay, so then the thing is that part of what was the Versetzung plan was for you to look like you were crazy. So when you told other people about it, you would look like a discredited person. That was part of the strategy. And in fact, that's part of the strategy that the US uses now. And so it's easy to also see that it's a planetary thing instead of a localized in one country kind of thing. So, or in a group of countries as the Eastern Bloc was. So the thing is that this surveillance data is used for drone strikes. Right? This is a really critical thing to understand because it is not comparable in the sense that when I checked last, the Stasi did not have drones that they deployed against other countries. So it's scary in the sense that it is both personal in that the Versetzung threat is a realistic thing that is done. I've never been arrested in the United States, but I've been detained more than a dozen times at airports. I've had my property taken. I've had my email, my phones, all of these records seized under secret court order that I wasn't even allowed to know about. And it is not because I am a criminal. It is because, as a journalist, having worked with WikiLeaks, as a journalist, having worked with Der Spiegel, as a journalist, I have worked on controversial topics, and so I have been targeted by this.
Because you're dangerous?
Well, because information and truth is dangerous. This is what we see with Snowden's leaks. Right. Look at the democratic debate that is taking place around the world now that people understand what is actually going on. Right? So the point is that when we compare these things to the Stasi, almost all of the Stasi's data would fit on a single hard drive today. Whereas the NSA is building data centers in Utah, a so-called massive data repository, one of, I think, at least 3 or 4, which can store the internet metadata and information about the planet and all of the targeted subjects for over 100 years.
What?
So if the Stasi is one hard drive, this is like many city blocks worth of hard drives, worth of data, and that's just one part of one set of the data that is being recorded, right? And so someone in Berlin actually did a great art project that showed the filing cabinet density and volume of the Stasi's archives, which is a 1 or 2 small buildings in Berlin. And by comparison, the NSA is sets and sets of city blocks across Berlin, orders of magnitude larger than what the Stasi had. But it is still different. There is a difference in the terror. But if you go to a place like Yemen, or you go to a place like Pakistan or Afghanistan or Iraq, then you start to see the same terror in people. And that is the thing that we must understand. It is different than the Stasi in that it is not just our neighbors, but it is our Muslim neighbors. When you meet a Muslim that flies into America, and then you meet a rich white person that flies into America.
Who's the potential terrorist? Huh?
Well, the point is that both are considered a potential terrorist, but one of them is aware of it. And that one is less free by far, merely because of their religious beliefs, which may not have even been a choice. They may be born this way. That is, they're born to Muslim parents, just as I was born to Jewish parents. This is not my choice, but it is now, of course, a legacy that this system basically codifies and forces upon us, and it creates a kind of suspicion, and it creates a kind of fear and a culture around this, right? When the United States has CIA agents in New York City working with the New York police, infiltrating intentionally the Muslim communities, this is a kind of Versetzung where people no longer participate in the political life, and they say this, and they don't even want to give interviews with their names attached to it. Is it comparable to the Stasi for Merkel? No, but that's because Merkel is not a Muslim, and she does not understand this. And that's okay, because it does not have to be exactly one-to-one. We don't need jars with scent samples for dogs for it to be wrong.
Right.
But those exist too in the United States. So the question is not whether or not it is like the Stasi. The question is whether or not the result is horrible. And that is an unquestionable result, which we see now. And so what Snowden has shown us, Manning has shown us as well. Manning has shown us the data, it has been said. Well, Snowden has shown us the architecture. The result has always been open for us to see. And so now the important part is that we have the information to change these things. Fundamentally, we can make it so that Dragnet surveillance is worthless by using strong cryptography and mathematics. We can change the political ramifications in that we can say no to torture. We can say no to targeted assassinations. We can say no to drone strikes. Right. We can say no to Versetzung-like techniques of infiltration, secret police, intelligence agencies that are massively overfunded.
But how? I mean, every freaking country in the world is affected by the surveillance.
But not every country in the world is doing the same thing.
Exactly.
The whole planet.
But more or less sounds like we need to have like a global solution for that. Maybe maybe human rights or something.
Yeah, mention links. Yeah. I think that in the 70s there was a thing that was called the Church Committee. This is Senator Frank Church, and what he talked about was exactly this topic. We need to have truth and reconciliation. So it was about the American intelligence community. In fact, it also had to do with warrantless wiretapping, assassinations. It had to do with all kinds of things which were completely unthinkable to the public at the time. But as it just so happened, in some cases, exactly the unthinkable, what was, in most people's minds impossible, was what was actually not only probable, but actually happening to people. So we need to have a global church committee of sorts, but I think the European Union needs to have a kind of truth and reconciliation about this as well. America is a great country and it has great people, but that does not mean that its government is always great or that its government's great people.
Same here.
Absolutely. It does not mean that the government's great people are necessarily acting in the interest of everyone. It is the case that we can change this, and it is the case that, for example, we can change these things by doing a few key things, but one of them is to play a different game. Instead of playing the spying game, like everyone seems to be doing, we should actually secure our communications. This is a radical concept, right? So when you hear about things like CISPA, SOPA, PIPA, and ACTA, what you hear is people trying to expand authoritarian control, where they can watch, where they can monitor, where they can interfere. But if we want to actually secure the internet, we should make it so that when you make a phone call, no one can monitor it without you detecting it. And when you detect it, you should have a trail that allows you to understand who has ordered this, where has it occurred, and what the consequences are. This ensures a kind of accountability where currently at the moment, if someone is able to, they simply will be able to do so from a technological perspective, and the law will have no effect on whether or not it will occur. Because in fact, whether or not it occurs from German hands is irrelevant, because it will certainly happen by American hands, even in Germany. So we can change this by having strong cryptography, free and open source software to drive it, open standards that allow us to know it, and not just for very important people. When Merkel wants to make a secure phone call to Obama, you can bet that that is a secure phone call that very few people can interfere with other than the BND and the National Security Agency.
Well, how can I have the same technology that Merkel has?
But you probably can't, would be my guess, because I would guess that the German government doesn't want you to have completely secure communications. But you can use things that give some approximation of it, like Moxie Marlinspike's Red Phone, which is for encrypted phone calls on Android, TextSecure, which is also on Android for encrypted text messaging. There's Private GSM, which is built on free software. That is not completely free, but this is better than, for example, Skype, which is completely backdoored by the PRISM program, as we know now. And
so if I Skype with my parents, the United States could listen into it?
Sure, but it's less that the United States can and more that Microsoft is able to, which means that anybody that works at Microsoft who has access to these programs and the United States can probably monitor these things, which is actually significantly scarier because it suggests not that the benevolent American government, which is not always so benevolent, it's not just them, it's also everybody that works at Microsoft. And now that we know that, what do you want to bet that there are some pretty bad people trying to get a job at Microsoft so that they have access to that, right? So the question is not whether America is benevolent, the question is whether or not it is truly the case that it is only America that has access to it. And of course the answer is that that's not the case. We know that that's not the case. So there are things you can do like using Tor, which is a project that I work on, which is an anonymity network, which allows you to circumvent censorship and surveillance, but it's not perfect. No things are perfect. There's no panacea to this, but we can get a lot closer to perfection, if you will, by seeing that we want law and technology to merge such that when the law says someone can't monitor you, cryptography ensures that that's the case. Assuming you've met the person, you can verify that this connection is secure. Many people believe this is how the system already works, but the reality is that that's not how the system works. You can test this. If you have a phone and you plug it into the phone line when you're on the call and you pick it up and you hear your friends that are talking, you know that it's not secure.
Right.
So we know in some cases that it's just not secure, but we don't conceptualize this and understand it in a way which we expand to think of the whole planet. But what this means is that when you call your doctor on a telephone, because the BND or the BKA or the FBI would like to wiretap someone, so too can anyone with the basic technology available in any phone. So this is not a proportional thing, and it means everyone is left, in this insecure state. And it just so happens that the NSA has decided to exploit these insecure states. And in a sense, we can take it to a higher level and use the same term. We can say, therefore, Germany is left insecure. So the NSA can wiretap it. It's not just about the state of your telephone. It's also about your actual state.
Really?
Yeah. Which is, it's a terrifying thing. And this is what Snowden has revealed to us. Many people will cynically say, well, we already knew this. Yes, but now we've confirmed it. Exactly. And we even know the code names for the programs. Exactly. And people will say, oh, yes, well, there's nothing to be done about it. All of the data is already out there. And of course, the point is that those people don't know what they're talking about.
Especially when politicians say that, it's crazy, right? If they say there's nothing that can be done, that's why we voted them in.
Well, it says to me that you have ineffective politicians if they say that. Adults are talking here. If they don't know what to do, then it's time to invite people that do. Right? The reality of the situation is that there's a thing I like to call the rule of law fallacy. And that would be, imagine for a moment that there's a law against dying of cancer. That's not a very effective law. There are limits to the rule of law. There are limits such that when someone makes a law about a thing, let's say that you're not allowed to die from cancer, you'll still die because the reach of the law is just simply not total. Mm-hmm. And we have to acknowledge those limits. So likewise, when we say people are absolutely not going to have wiretapping capabilities unless it goes through a judge, if the technology doesn't change it, the law doesn't actually impact what's going to happen. Not really. And especially when there's this kind of sad political state of affairs where politicians are a mix of not caring and a mix of not caring about the German people and their privacy.
Well, maybe they are caring about themselves.
Well, I think part of it is just that they don't understand, and the other part of it is they don't know what to do. And somewhere in between, there's the fear of repercussions of making changes that fundamentally actually would secure Germany. So, for me, this is a problem that I think is about economics more than about civil liberties at times. But how is it that competing nations will really be able to have honest economic discussions when you have so much spying going on? And the reality for the everyday German person is that how will this impact German industry? And the answer is it will impact German industry negatively in many cases whenever Germany and the United States are competing. That doesn't really bode well, I think. And that means that workers will lose jobs. It means owners will lose factories. It means that regular people will, I think, have quite a hard time economically if and when there's even more scarcity than there is today. So this is a really concerning thing. But when I talk about the rule of law fallacy, what I mean to suggest, the big picture, is it's a little bit more than just talking about economic espionage. It's a little bit more than just talking about civil liberties. It's about acknowledging that there actually are, unlike, say, with atomic weapons, there really are things that we can do, right? We can't really stop people from having atomic weapons, no matter how many treaties, no matter what. But it's a little bit like landmines and a little bit like atomic weapons. There are regulations that we can bring in that will change the state of play. And then there are technologies we can use to detect, radioactive isotopes. There are things we can do to make sure that people don't use cluster bombs, that they don't plant landmines, right? And that there are, punitive damages for people that would do those things. None of those things actually eradicate the whole of the problem, but they really do mitigate it. And it would be preposterous to hear a German politician saying there's nothing to be done about atomic weapons or landmines or cluster bombs. That's ridiculous. Again, adults are talking. When adults are talking, is it really the case that a reasonable, rational adult would suggest there's nothing to be done about these things? Like there's nothing to be done about torture? No, of course not. But just the same, technology is very, very difficult for people to understand. And people in some cases don't understand cryptography is a part of a solution, a planetary solution, when it's actually impossible for someone to wiretap your phone call to your friends. When your mother calls you or your father calls you on the telephone, and that's not wiretappable. We are moving towards a world where the bulk interception of all of humanity is not as valuable. Therefore, it is less likely to be the case that it will happen, but if it does happen, it will be less likely that value will be extracted from it. So when politicians say there's no solution, we have to push back and say, no, let's actually secure our communications. Let's secure our communications metadata. Let's make sure that if you want to wiretap a terrorist, you use exceptional means through judicial process, not, for example, everyone being kept insecure so that anybody can do this. So, for example, in the case of the Staatstolljan, in, I believe it was in Bavaria, there is a police officer who...
Staatstrojaner, yeah.
Yeah. The police officer used it against his daughter because he wanted to monitor his daughter. So tell me, how is that a good idea if it is also important that someday they can use this against a terrorist, right? This is the kind of stuff that takes place right now in Germany. And just the other day while I was on CDF, I asked one of the intelligence coordinators and the interior minister of Bavaria about whether or not they break into people's houses, bug their telephones, break into their computers. And I think the phrase, someone said the translation was something like, "Oh, we don't do that, of course we do that." Right? Is that the world we want to live in? Really? Where like police officers' daughters get multi-million-dollar special customized backdoors so that they can monitor their children as they would monitor terrorists? No, that's not proportional, that's not reasonable, and it shows that because it is technically possible, a judge's order is not actually the difference between it happening and not happening. And because of Snowden, but also because of other whistleblowers, because of places like the Chaos Computer Club revealing this Staatstrojan, that actually tells us that there's this other world. And we should not tolerate, especially in, I think Germany should not tolerate in an election cycle, this kind of dialogue. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's a preposterous thing to say there's nothing to be done. And in fact, Germany knows exactly what is to be done. It's election time, right? So when people say they don't want to talk about these things, kick them out. And when someone says it's not like the Stasi, but then they basically support drone operations that kill women and children, innocent people, people who don't even have a trial, who are killed because of a data trail, not because they even know their name.
War crime.
That's a war crime.
Yeah.
And when they shoot them twice, that's a so-called double tap, that's a war crime. And the surveillance data ties into those actions. There is a direct connection between them because the surveillance data is used for targeting, and targeting is the first step in identification for murder, which is a war crime in this case, especially with double tap drone strikes. It's especially a war crime when it's women and children who are completely innocent in a sovereign nation being killed by another sovereign nation. And the thing is that the German people, I think, traditionally don't want anything to do with this, especially now. So when people don't want to talk about it openly, when they don't want to take a stand against these things, that tells you what their character is. And the fact that at the same time human rights and economics tie together, that I think is really fantastic, because it means that even if you don't care about little Muslim children in Yemen or Pakistan, you might care about German jobs. Right. And for one, this you know, I mean, it has happened many times before, but that they are unified is very important, because it means we can talk about economics that are beneficial as well as human rights, and we can say that they're not in contradiction. Today, standing in support of either of those things is to stand for the other. And so we should see this. And the German people have the opportunity now, I think, to ask Merkel and other people reasonable questions that will show their true character about these topics, which range from spying on the German people and national sovereignty to political assassination and murder. Those are all completely unreasonable things to be engaged in, especially at planetary scale.
Thanks. And we'll be back with your questions in part 3.